right, Texans, well, welcome back to this is Senator Bob Hall, Senate District 2 in East Texas. We got a real great opportunity today to talk with another legislator from the state of Idaho. Many of you know that we're hearing the bill in our Health and Human Services today, Senate Bill 2 by Senator Charles Perry, that is going to protect women's sports here in Texas. We're going to try to save women's sports for them with the problem we have with transgender girls starting to take over women's sports. Texas is stepping up like some other states, and we really are privileged here. We've got Barbara Ehardt from the great state of Idaho. She's a representative there, and she carried the bill in Idaho that stopped the transgender girls from taking over sports there. Barbara, tell us a little bit about yourself and what happened in Idaho.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Senator. I mean, you guys have been so gracious. This has just been a fantastic trip, and I appreciate the opportunity to come to Texas and help testify on this legislation. It's, as you know, and as I'll share, very near and dear to my heart. You see, before I was a representative, even before I get into my career, I was born in the 60s, grew up in the 70s, and people don't understand that the opportunities we take for granted right now, they were not my opportunities growing up. And people would ask me all the time, what is it that you want to do when you grow up? And I literally would tell them that I wanted to play sports. And I was literally told that's not what girls do. And so I kind of held on to my dreams as we went along and was able to play a little bit of junior high basketball in high school, as one would expect. And then I was able to receive a scholarship, and I played Division I women's basketball at Idaho State. And then I embarked on a 15-year coaching career as a Division I women's basketball coach at four fantastic institutions: UC Santa Barbara, BYU, Washington State, and then back in California as the head coach at Cal State Fullerton. And it was with that background when I became a legislator. And as this issue seemed to be popping up, especially, as you know, in Connecticut, this for me all started in 2018 when I, thought back on the experiences I have had and how people have paved the path forward for me and my obligation. Truly, I feel my obligation to pave the path forward for other young women who come after us. And what's happening is, as you well know, in the world of athletics is absolutely detrimental to what Title IX was all about. Because Title IX, again, it changed my life. And moving forward, if we don't take the proper steps to protect women's athletics for both girls and women, it's not going to be here, and it is being taken over by many biological boys and men, and it's really sad.
Let me interrupt you.
Yes.
We've got some folks out there. We've been working this, and we all know what Title IX means. I think we may have some folks out there who don't quite understand that Title IX was when the law was passed that said we need to have fair and balanced opportunities for sports for boys and girls. Up to that point, of what Barbara was talking about growing up, there was only men's sports, boys sports. There were no girls basketball teams, girls softball teams, no girls volleyball teams, maybe intramurals, but that was about it. And so we stepped up and said, no, they cannot compete against boys, because one thing is an absolute, undeniable scientific medical fact that there is no argument that anybody can make, is that there is a significant physical difference between men and women. That is always been that way, and the male body has significant advantages over the female body when it comes to bone density, muscle mass, size, speed, everything.
Larger heart, the larger lungs.
Larger heart, larger lung. So in any kind of physical competition, a male body has a natural advantage. And so when a person is born as a male and then later does things to their body, whether it's chemically or surgically, to change into being a self-identified female, that advantage sticks with them. It may diminish a little bit, but it doesn't go away. And so anytime you have a male involved against the average male is well equipped with bone density and muscle mass and speed and so on, better than most any female. And so this has been an incredible disadvantage. So What Barbara's saying is, as there become more transgender females moving into sports, females, legitimate females, are being pushed out of the sports. We're going to be losing scholarships. They're going to be places on the team, and they're going to be pushed out of winning positions. Because, Barbara, what are sports all about?
As I said today in testimony, Senator, though the other side likes to pretend that sports are about just the community, humanity, participation, that's simply not true. Those are areas that we can all benefit from as part of the subset. But sports is about competition, and it's about winning. If it wasn't about winning, then quite frankly, players wouldn't be cut and coaches wouldn't be fired. It's about winning. And then all other lessons we learn come under and after that. And so to take away, as you said, our opportunities and, our male counterparts have always had those opportunities. And we're not taking away opportunities from biological boys and men. And that's something I think that, as you know, as we listen to the hearings today, probably the point wasn't made enough. We're not taking away those opportunities. They still get to compete. They just have to compete on the side of their biological sex. And, Senator, one of the other points that I would like to have made today that had slipped my mind is if we look at what's happened nationally and we look at how many biological males have identified as females and been successful and either won or taken the spot of our girls, to that point, they all started on the male side first. So it's not as if they can't not compete on the male side. They all competed on the male side, including the one of which I referenced, which was June Eastwood, who had competed as John Eastwood at the University of Montana for 3 years. And John's last year decided to identify and compete as June. And so in the Big Sky Championships, of course, Idaho, the state of Idaho and Idaho State, where I had played, being a part of that in the Big Sky Championships, June Eastwood annihilated our women in the 1600 meters. I mean, it wasn't even close. And so these are the reasons and some of the, why we both fight for this, because we know it's not fair. And people say, well, give us the example. The examples are popping up all over. Plus the testimony you and I both heard today, the testimony I heard in Idaho, they're out there and they're planning to compete and they want to compete. So what we're doing now is clearly delineating that if a biological male wants to compete, they can, but we're making sure they understand that they need to compete on the biological male sex side. And so we're giving them clear direction and keeping it fair.
Absolutely. Speaking of testimony, you did a really fantastic job this morning in testifying. Let's let the folks take a look at what you had to say a little earlier today.
Thank you.
Barbara, if you would state your name for the record, who you're with, and I have you witnessing on both Senate Bill 2 and Senate Bill 32.
Yes, excellent, Madam Chair, good committee. My name is Barbara Ehardt. I am the state representative from Idaho. I am the author and the sponsor that brought the Fairness in Women's Sports Act last year, and of which many of these legislations that are now passing in the state are following. And so I appreciate this opportunity, Madam Chair.
Welcome to Texas, the representative.
Thank you, thank you. Committee, if I may, let me just share with you a little bit of my story. I was one of these people, these women who was born in the 60s, grew up in the 70s, and you see, Title IX changed my life. This exactly, it changed my life, and we're about the same age. But you see, when I was growing up, and probably much like you, people would ask me all the time, what is it that you want to do when you grow up? And I literally would tell them that I wanted to play sports. And I was literally told that's not what girls do. And so when I say Title IX changed my life, it did. Because let me share with you, as I kept persevering, I had the opportunity to, of course, play in junior high and high school, which of course we would assume, but that wasn't to be expected. But then I went on to play collegiately as a Division I athlete playing at Idaho State. And then, Madam Chair and Committee, I went on to have a 15-year Division I women's basketball coaching career. I coached at four fantastic institutions, UC Santa Barbara, BYU, Washington State, and then as a head coach at Cal State Fullerton. Now, as I serve in the legislature and as I brought this legislation, you can see that there are some credentials that back it. So let me, given that we're short on time, let me just share with you something real quickly. In the 2019-2020 year, Idaho in the Big Sky Conference, we had at the University of Montana, June Eastwood, who competed the senior year. June had competed for 3 years prior to that, University of Montana, as John Eastwood, decided that last year to compete as June. And let me just tell you, in the Big Sky Championships, June annihilated our women. Absolutely annihilated our women. And so to think that there aren't advantages, there are huge advantages. And one of the problems that we failed to realize, and you had questioned earlier there, Senator, was this idea that in the world of college athletics, we really are a peat and repeat. And if June had started competing as a freshman, I guarantee you that every single conference in the Big Sky would have been forced to go and find somebody that could compete against June. In other words, they would have to find a biological male athlete to compete, because as much as we want to think, as much as the other side says this is about the humanity, this is about the community, and this is about inclusion, that's great and fine, except in the world of sports, as you well know, it's about competition and it's about winning. If it wasn't about competition, if it wasn't about winning, then athletes wouldn't be cut from teams and coaches wouldn't be fired. And so to think that it's about this other is a false narrative designed to get us emotionally involved in something that sports was never about. And so as I look at the opportunities I had, and I look at those who had gone before me and helped to pave the way, I have always felt an obligation to do the same for those who follow after me. And I have many other thoughts that maybe if you have questions I can share, but I will say this: as Idaho led out and led the way, and as the world descended on Idaho, telling us of the many terrible things that would happen, none of that has happened. And so as I come before you here, Texas, I am so proud to see you take up this legislation, and I hope that you will join Idaho and join in our coalition, and then we can leave it to you to help lead the way as we go forward and help preserve opportunities for those of us who are 50% of the population. Don't discriminate against us. Thank you very much, committee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I so appreciate, I'm going to go to Senator Perry here for a second, but I so appreciate your opening remarks. Senator Perry knows that in 2017, I carried a bill and talked about Title IX. And when he laid out the bill on the Senate floor during regular session, I talked a lot about Title IX because I feel exactly like you. I was told that really there was nowhere to go. I mean, like, you want to be a college athlete? There's no really women's college sports. And so I've watched it flourish. And while we're talking about the difference between men and women's sports, and there is a distinct physiological advantage as a male over us, it doesn't make their sports better than ours. And I want to say that loud and clear. I love watching women's sports. Who didn't love watching the College World Series softball tournament? How exciting was that? So congratulations on being a coach all those years.
Thank you.
Something I wanted to do and didn't get to on my bucket list.
It's been a fortunate opportunity, fortunate career. Thank you.
Representative, it's good to see you, and I appreciate you taking the time to come down to Texas from Idaho. And again, welcome. Hopefully you'll have some time to get some Tex-Mex, but you may be in the wrong city to really get good Tex-Mex, but we'll see. Idaho's been, or let me back up. The narrative is for states that go down this road that they'll be hurt economically. Has Idaho seen an economic downturn over since your legislation's been passed?
Right, Madam Chair, Senator, great question. And I'm so glad you asked it, because Idaho has not been hurt economically. As a matter of fact, Idaho has thrived economically. Let me just share with you a couple things. Now, I know we're not Texas, so these numbers may not blow you out of the water, but we had an $800 million surplus that had nothing to do with the ARPA money. People are flowing into Idaho right now. I know they are Texas too, but we vary as far as percentages, if we're 1 or 2 in the nation, as far as those coming into Idaho, because they're coming in for both the economic advantage, but also because people want to be in states that support our girls and women and stand up for traditional values. Idaho is doing very well, Senator.
Courts, have they challenged your legislation?
Yes, Madam Chair, Senator, the courts have challenged it. The ACLU said right off the bat when I first brought this legislation in the House that they would sue. And 2 weeks after the governor signed, there was a lawsuit. The lawsuit has progressed from the federal district court. May 3rd, this year, it was in the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit has heard it. The Ninth Circuit has sent it back to the federal district because they're questioning if there's even standing at this point. The plaintiff, Lindsay Hecox from Boise State, has dropped out, and we don't even know if the ACLU has standing any longer. So we're going to find out.
So, not to get too deep in the woods on it, but the ACLU is basically suing a state that was upholding non-discriminatory practices availed to women under Title IX.
Exactly. Sorry, Madam Chair, Senator, that's exactly right. There wasn't. What's so ironic about this is there was a day that the ACLU stood so strongly for women, and it's just flipped, and it's they no longer stand there with us.
Up is down and down is up, and yes is no and no is yes is all I can equate that to. The ACLU hasn't been known as an organization that is consistent, to say the least, and this is one other area that they're highlighting that inconsistency. On the NCAA front, there's a thread that they'll pull conference. They'll pull their influence from states that go down this road. Do you have an example or two where maybe that is not the case?
Yes, Madam Chair, Senator. Certainly it was the ACLU who has been pressuring the NCAA to punish certainly Idaho to start with, and punish any state that would dare to support Title IX and our girls and women in sports. But let me be clear, because there has been a false narrative. Idaho has not been punished by the NCAA. They have not taken any action. And I do believe amongst the 9 states that have enacted legislation such as this, Alabama being one of them, hosted NCAA championships, I believe, as you had mentioned, Senator, in softball, and there was no punishment. So I think the NCAA has far bigger problems with which they may need to address right now.
Thank you, Representative, for making the trip down, and thank you for the testimony. It was it's credible, and it's based on actual experience, so it's good.
Exactly. Thank you, Senator.
To be clear, how many states have passed legislation like the one that you introduced in Idaho?
Excellent. Madam Chairman, Senators, to this date, unless I leave somebody off, and I hope I don't do that, Idaho, Mississippi, Arkansas, then West Virginia, Montana, Florida, all passed both K through 12 and high school. Also, we had Tennessee and Alabama pass K through 12. And then we had South Dakota, with a little bit of a hiccup, put in executive orders K through 12 and higher ed and college. So I believe that's 9 to the state. And if Texas were to join in, Texas would be in a great position to help continue to lead out.
So I have another question about the economic impact, and I think you stated clearly. So I do think that the NCAA has retracted from their initial statement that they gave early in 21 that no one would be able to host or whatever, and I think they've retracted that since. And we can. I'm saying that from memory, but do you have any reference to that?
Right, Madam Chair, Committee, there's bound to be something I missed, but as you might imagine, I keep as good a track as I can with the NCAA and that which they're planning to do. There have been a number of statements that had been conflated with that which the NCAA said and that which the ACLU was pushing to have happen. And I do not believe that the NCAA at all said anything as far as solidly going to do this or that. It was the ACLU that had been pushing that, and many people conflated the two statements. So no, to this point, the NCAA has not, nor has indicated that they absolutely will punish any state. I don't believe the NCAA is really in a position to do that. They start then to become an actor as in the government, and that's really not the NCAA's position to override that which states and state legislators do. And Madam Chair, if I may also say, one of the things that I think we need to caution ourselves against is throughout this process, we have seen that we've had the NCA, we've had corporations, we've had the ACLU, we've had various regions all try to pressure legislators as though they are the ones representing the people. They are not representing the people. And if we allow these major money holding corporations to come in as they tried to do in Idaho to descend and exert their will of a few rather than all of the people whom we represent, that would be a travesty to our Republican form of government. So I hope that we will not allow corporations to exert that sort of pressure and will.
Representative, one quick follow-up to that. You mentioned the ACLU. I had just said to my staff, I go, where's the ACLU that used to be for women's rights? And I feel very strongly about, women's rights and the strides that we have made in recent years and decades. When you talk about women's rights, in my reading and studying, it does seem like this becomes a confluence of some from the Democrat Party or from the left and the right seem to come together and agree on women's sports being for women, biologically born women. Have you seen that in Idaho?
Madam Chairman, what's so fascinating about that question you just asked is that this issue crosses all boundaries. It crosses all political levels, Democrat, Republican, it crosses all races, where when you poll it, it polls like a 75-25 in favor of supporting girls and women. And that was the case in Idaho. And even in the most recent election in the 10 battleground states, Wisconsin, Michigan, states known as Democrat strongholds, North Carolina, it polled at a 75-25% rate of supporting girls and women. What's so odd is as soon as it comes forward in legislation, it's like our Democrat colleagues feel like they can't support common sense legislation, and it baffles me. But yes, it has been supported nationally. Overwhelmingly, people are in favor of supporting these opportunities for us.
And then my final question would be that I do believe that President Biden has issued an executive order that was very similar to the executive order issued by President Obama in, I think it was May the 16th, 2016. I remember it very well, being a former athlete, being a former college athlete. And so President Trump repealed that executive order. And I believe that President Biden, one of his first acts, I know he did about 100 executive orders in 24 hours, but I think that this was one that he did very, very quickly. Am I correct on that?
Madam Chairman, you are correct on that. What former President Obama had issued was called the Dear Colleague letter.
Right.
That was sent out to, of course, all the high schools. And basically what was interesting, especially in Idaho, if I may speak briefly to that, you see, the other side purports to say that we already have processes in place and it dictates this. The processes are not at all what they're purporting to say. So in Idaho, what was fascinating with that Dear Colleague letter, in Idaho, what our policies that had been pushed onto us in a few years prior say that all a biological male has to do is begin the process of transition and wait a year. It doesn't say they have to take hormones once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month. Just begin. And so the Dear Colleague letter was one that wanted them to identify as only, not even have to take hormones. And so it was under President Trump that they sent the second Dear Colleague letter saying, forget the first Dear Colleague letter, and that we will be essentially supporting girls and women in sports. And of course, Attorney General William Barr had issued a statement of interest and support during our legislation, and the administration had come out in support of it, as did the Department of Education.
So has the executive order, so we go 3 executive orders. Dear Colleague says this is what you have to do. The Dear Colleague that repeals it, and then we're back to President Obama's original stance, which was at nearly the end of his presidency, 8 years. Has that impacted your legislation?
Oh, Madam Chairman, committee, basically at this point, it has not, because essentially our legislation was immediately sued and sent to the courts. And so there's been an injunction issued because we had an athlete from Boise State, petition the courts, Lindsay Hecox. And at this point, that is the only reason that it has been tied up. Lindsay Heath, the reason it's been sent back, Hecox is withdrawn. And at this point, we're thinking that if there's no reason for the injunction to remain, that our law will go into effect.
Thank you. Senator Hall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of questions. First, Representative, I want to thank you for taking the time to come here. It's not often that we get into such a bill as what we have now. This is quite controversial out there, that we actually have someone who comes in here who has kind of gone before us through this gauntlet and can bring in some factual information relative to what actually happens. We often hear great speculation about what's going to happen if we pass this bill. Your enlightenment of what actually happened in Idaho as a result of this passing, economically in the courts, those are things that are thrown up at us quite often on other bills. We just saw it on our constitutional carry bill, which was the same argument every time we tried to do something protecting individual rights of self-defense. There's going to be a gunfight on every street. Well, there never has been and never will be.
Right. But
for you to bring that information here and talk about the reality of what is happening, and what we're talking about is back to, as Chair said and you said, we're getting back to what we're always want to do, is save women's sports. We want to protect what was put in place, was recognized that, and it was said earlier, one of the most well understood scientific facts, there is a difference between men and women. And to try to pretend there isn't, to satisfy some small minority group who makes a choice, and to destroy what was been put in place to protect women's sports, is just kind of beyond my comprehension. But before we let you go, I just want to make sure, is there anything else that you think we should know about what you have learned and experienced, and so that we can get facts of what actually happens when we make sensible legislation like what this is, that is fact-based from your experience? Is there anything that you haven't covered that you would want us to know?
Madam Chairman, Senator, knowing that you have a long list of people to go, maybe if you would allow me to just maybe hit on one other thing that I have found has been repeated throughout the states. And so at least as you guys go forward, maybe you'll have that information. And I know however it fits within your legislation. But one thing I found from the other side, it doesn't matter what the legislation says. They just use their talking points and continue on and ignore logical facts. When it comes to this legislation, and when it comes to how this would be enforced and enacted, we have to remember that processes are already in place, that terms of eligibility are already in place in the high school and even at the college level to determine eligibility. When it comes to things such as, I know the other side likes to talk about pelvic exams, that legislation such as this is going to be so invasive to all women. It doesn't, any of our girls that play. And senators, if I just may remind you, this is simply not true. Whether you're a high school athlete or a collegiate athlete, as you well know, Senator, that every athlete has to have a physical, and in that physical, for at least for us as females, there are 5 questions that a doctor can ask to determine your biological sex without ever touching you. So there would be no exam, but just the first one, merely asking, what's your sex? Are you male or female? The next question that I find on almost every physical throughout the United States, as I've looked at it from Idaho to, Connecticut, is it asks, have you had any hospitalizations or surgery? So certainly if there's any gender reassignment surgery and somebody didn't know, this is a place where it would be discussed with your doctor. Are you taking any medication or pills? You know, again, if you're on hormone replacement therapy, this is where you discuss it with your doctor. Another question that seems to be out there is, are you missing any organs? And it literally asks kidneys or testicles. So again, this is where this would be able to be discussed with your doctor. When was your first menstrual cycle, your last and the longest in between? These are all questions that are pertinent to us as women. And then, you know, certainly there are questions pertaining to, you know, the proverbial male cough test. So Senator, thank you for just letting me finish filling in that the answers are all there. This is the false narratives that the other side tends to bring up. They are answerable. And I just, as you guys bringing this forward as Texans, I am so proud to be here in your state. Thank you for allowing me to come and testify. Thank you for bringing this up. Senator, for you before, you know, Senator, for bringing it now. And with that, I will conclude my testimony. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here and for all that you do for Idaho. We wish Idaho well. Congratulations on y'all's uptick economically.
Yes, thank you very much, Senator. Thank you.
Wow, Barbara, that is really some compelling testimony there. And following you was several more. I mean, we could show these folks a great testimony for some doctors, educators, folks with UIL that recognize that this is a real problem that's growing. I think we had testimony from one of the leading people at UIL that says that a couple of years ago they maybe get one inquiry about this issue, and this year already he's had over a dozen, and so it's growing. It's growing. No question about that. So let me ask a couple of questions about, since Idaho has passed the bill and you're now into it post-bill passing. I know you got threats just like we've been getting threats every time here in Texas we want to do something. We were starting to get threats from businesses that said, well, you're going to do that here in Texas, we're going to pull up stakes and we're going to move out. And so tell me, what has been the economic impact to Idaho? Did you have businesses leaving because you now won't let boys compete in girls' sports?
You know, I just love that particular question, because we were told that both that they might consider leaving, but that others wouldn't come. People would quit moving to Idaho, and businesses and corporations would quit coming because of discriminatory practices. And I'm here to tell you, just as much as you know, that simply was not the case. That not only has everyone continued to come to Idaho, major businesses and corporations are continuing to relocate here. And as far as the economic impact to Idaho, for us, I know it's not the same as your numbers, but we had an $800 million surplus, and Idaho is doing great.
There are times when we wish we had an $800 million surplus. I can tell you that.
No, we're doing great.
And I think we're going to see that, because there's a whole lot more to being in Idaho and to being in Texas than who's playing on the girls' sports team. So I think that's a lot of rhetoric out there. But there's another another major organization that likes to play their scare tactics. I think they're going to be the social hall monitor for Texas, and that's the NCAA.
Right.
I think they made some threats on Idaho. So did they follow through on them, or was it just idle threats?
Well, they made an initial statement that they were going to support those who did not engage in discriminatory practices as far as their championships. Now, it was the ACLU who took those threats and the statements farther and made insinuations. We did work with, had some communication with the NCAA, but the fact of the matter is the NCAA has done nothing to punish Idaho. They did not pull any championships, which we, granted, this was a COVID year, but they still didn't know that there weren't going to be the NCAA championships, and we host the first and second round of March Madness for our men. And so not only have they not punished Idaho, but other states now, as you know, that have adopted this, including we've got Alabama, who hosted championships, and I believe in softball, amongst other things. The NCAA has not punished Idaho there, and I guarantee you, with the likes of Florida coming on and looking, Texas has to remember the kind of power and influence that Texas yields. The NCAA is not going to mess with Texas. Nobody messes with Texas. The NCAA is not going to mess with Texas. Texas is going to be in a position to lead out.
Well, there's no reason for them to.
Right, right.
And one last issue that I wanted to talk to you about was that it's thrown up there is, oh, this is just discriminating against the people who make the transition. Well, first of all, people don't have a choice of what sex they're born with,
Right.
but they do have a choice in how they live their lives.
Yes.
And these are folks who have made a decision to live their life differently than how they were born. And so if there is discrimination, it seems to me the discrimination is against the girls that were born female, that love to play sports and work hard at it, like what you did, to say that's going to be part of my life, is playing sports, to work real hard, to get really good at what they're doing, and then all of a sudden have to compete against a male who has decided to self-identify as a female, recognizing the significant difference. And we're already seeing it in what's happening with a power lifter from New Zealand,
Laurel Hubbard.
Then we've had others that enter in the sports that you were talking about.
Yearwood Mitchell in
we
Connecticut.
had testimony today
Cece Telford.
that a female power lifter that got supplemented or replaced by a male who had been competing, decided wasn't winning enough against males, so would self-identify as a female. And now, but we have these girls will lose scholarships, will lose the opportunity to win medals, or even positions on the team.
Yeah, Senator, it's a lot of people have spoken about the opportunity for scholarships, and obviously as a collegiate coach, I understand that very well. I have spoken a lot about just the opportunity to compete, because there's so much benefit for a young girl to compete in sports. And so something I think I shared with you last night, let's just take what would happen at a high school if, the other side is saying, it's only one biological male boy. Let's say that he wanted to play on the girls' basketball team. It's only one biological boy. That surely can't hurt. And so, if we look at it, they'd say, well, he's just displacing the worst player on the team, who probably would have been cut the following year. And though that may be true, I disagree, because we've now deprived her of her opportunities. But let's play that out. So that one biological male that's just displaced this gal on the team actually has now just systematically changed the dynamics of the team, because the one gal that might have been the high scorer, might have been the most valuable player, whatever, the whole dynamics of that team changes. And it doesn't just stop there. Every team against whom they play, now the dynamics change, because they now have to guard this biological male, and how that plays out. And just like had shared with the clip, collegiately, you're almost going to be forced, even at the high school, let alone where you can go recruit it at the college, to go get somebody against whom they can compete and guard that biological male. But, I look at it and I say it doesn't stop there, because if we're willing to have just one biological male on a team, we have to keep playing that out. And so we have to say, what happens if you had 12 biological males try out for the team? You have to then be willing to allow all 12 of those biological males to take the place of the spots of the girls. And at that point, Senator, we're right back where we started. Where do all the girls go now?
Yeah, right back to pre-Title IX.
Pre-Title IX.
There is no place.
There's no place for us.
For girls. That's right. And so that's why this whole movement is about saving women's sports.
It
because
really is.
This is all about is saving women's
Yep.
sports. And
Yep.
so, Barbara, can't thank you enough. I appreciate you coming here to Texas to help us today with this. It's very good of you. I know you'll be going other places, and I encourage you to do that because we're going to get this bill passed here one way or another. It's going to be a challenge in this special session with the Democrats threatening to walk out, already have walked out once, maybe have walked out today. We're not sure yet. But so we don't have a quorum that couldn't pass them. Yeah. But we're here. The Republicans are here working for the people of Texas. The Democrats decided that rather than serve the people of Texas, they've decided to go to Washington, D.C. Hopefully they'll come back and we can get this passed, because this is not a partisan issue.
Senator, it's not. You're absolutely right. When it's pulled throughout the United States, as I had shared earlier too, it's like a 75-25. It crosses all lines, all demographics. People want to support girls and women.
Yeah, it only becomes partisan when people misrepresent
Good point.
what it's about. When they roll over and treat it as a discrimination, which it is not.
No.
Because if there's anybody being discriminated against, this is biological females that are being discriminated
100%.
against. And so it's unfortunate. But we're finding that in not just this bill, but other bills, that when they can't argue the issue on the facts, then they bring in the emotional arguments like discrimination and racism and things of that nature to try to kill them. But we're not going to let that happen. We're going to stick with the facts. We're going to keep pushing on this, and we're going to keep praying, because we know God is in control and it's in His hands, and we're gonna be His workers. So Barbara, thank you very much for being with us. Hope you have a great trip back, and look forward to you coming back and visiting with us again sometime.
Thank you so much, and we're so proud of Texas. Thanks for inviting me.
God bless you.
You too.
Well, thank you folks for being with us. God bless you, and God bless Texas.